Now we start with this session about values and business and responsibility in the business. And our first speaker is Alexi Perrino. He is an engineer. He's graduated from the ENI in Mass. He was the cluster manager in Materialia first, but because he was inspired, he has a lot of interest in financial things, and he was inspired by ROI, and he founded a startup and implemented ROI there. And how he do this, and what he has learned from previous projects, from the IMRR project, he will talk about now. Welcome, Alexi.
I will also put a timer.
Yeah, 20 minutes.
Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so this is a green button, right?
Yeah.
The one with all the arrow.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So I'm Alexi, and I'm here to present to you my understandings of responsible research innovation, what I've learned during this project, and how I use this in order to build a startup based on these principles. So before presenting the startup, I want to present this understanding, and in order to start, I would like to highlight the fact that we are currently living a revolution within the revolution we are living. What I mean by this is the fact that if I make a quick recap of what we experienced in the past, we can notice that there is a common aspect to the previous industrial revolution. They all happened at the expense of any social consideration and any social aspect. The first one caused mass rural exodus, the second transformed the worker into a resource, and the third one made him actually replaceable. So we can wonder, based on this, what makes this fourth industrial revolution so particular. In my opinion, what makes this revolution so particular is the fact that it's not anymore an industrial revolution. It's more something like a systemic revolution and a global one. Because of two things, in my opinion. The first one is the fact that industry used to be at the epicenter of these previous revolutions. And today, it's not anymore the case. It's one of the application fields. And secondly, as I already said, the three first industrial revolutions happened at the expense of the social aspect, but now things are changing because this fourth industrial revolution takes place not anymore in spite of this, but with social consideration, and sometimes even thanks to it. This leads me to this statement. This revolution is actually redefining the socio-economic balance. I picked a few examples in order to highlight the things. These examples are from the COVID time, so it's a little bit old-fashioned, but I'm pretty sure it's still up to date. We have, for example, the fact that Danone, one of the main public companies in France, decided to integrate into its constitution the fact that they want to work on environment. We have the government that released the French government that released Women-Men Equality Index, where all the companies are ranked based on some criteria. We have the same thing that is being studied in order to provide a diversity index. And we have some economic newspapers that start to release ranking based on the ability to reduce the carbon emissions for companies. This leads me to one thing. Initially, I wanted to make this presentation a little bit down to earth and to jump to one conclusion, but something today crossed my mind. What makes our civilization, what makes our species so particular is the fact that we are able to tell ourselves stories. Everything that rules, most of the things that are ruling our lives are based on stories we are able to tell us. For example, the fact that this city is called Vienna, it's because we all agreed of this. The fact that when we drive on a road, we decide not to cross a lane is because it's a story. This is something we all agreed. It's a commonly and shared belief that we all shared. And one of the most fantastic belief and one of the most fantastic story our civilization agreed to believe in used to be the fact that companies are built to make money. It used to be the norm. It used to be something we all believed. And today, something is changing. Today, we are rewriting the way we perceive companies. Companies are not anymore an economic object. It's not anymore an economic concept. It's becoming a socio-economic concept where companies are being evaluated on economic criteria such as return on investment, values, and so on, but also on some new criteria such as our ability to provide equality between men and women, our ability to take care of the planet, etc. And while we are rewriting these stories about companies, we are focusing on some new aspect, and we need tools in order to understand this new framework. And responsible research and innovation, it's only when we accept this new concept, this new perception of what is a company, that we can understand how responsible research and innovation can be useful for business. So this leads me to present you a real-life use case. So it will be my story I would like to tell you. And this story is called Jared. So Jared is it's a new startup which aims to build and to provide an intelligent assistant to help people to better manage their finance and to reach their goal. I want to answer a question that probably nobody will ask. It's why did I choose this name? So I just make a quick parenthesis. Who already in the room seen this movie? Yeah? Okay, not that much. For the other, I can only advise you to watch it because it's incredible. And it's my favorite movie. It's the one that really triggered something in me and pushed me to interest myself to finance. And what is interesting with this movie, it's the fact that it's explaining something really difficult to understand, the root cause of the 2008 subprime crisis. And one of the main characters is called Jared, you get it, and this character is the one that make all this movie and all this issue understandable. This guy make the finance understandable for us that are actually viewing this movie. And talking about making something difficult easy, this leads me to present my problem. My problem is the fact that today, managing your finance, it's something that requires knowledge, time, and discipline. And if you don't have any of it, you need assistance. This because of three main factors. The first one is education. Today, many relevant economic and financial information are not identified or used by people because of lack of financial education. The planning is something difficult because setting and tracking your financial goals need a further effort. And you can tell me that, okay, but if I don't have these skills, I have still the possibility to rely on some expert. But these experts cannot follow everybody at the level you expect. This means that many people are actually don't trust anymore a financial advisor and prefer to manage their wealth alone. This leads me to one statement. I picked a French statistic, but 49% of the French population considers that their financial goals are a limit to reach their projects that matters to them. No need to focus much more on data, but this slide is only there to highlight how critical the situation is. Because, for example, it's hard to believe that 20% of the population have a poor understanding of division, and it's worst to know and to learn that there is a so huge gap between several education levels. So this is my first statement, my first takeaway. I can say, if you want to build something RI, especially in startup, an advice would be to tackle a social challenge and, if possible, a major one. So now about my solution. Our solution is an intelligent and tailor-made tool, obviously, built to help you to inform yourself and to develop your knowledge, to better understand and improve your finance, and to define and achieve your goals. To summarize, it's a conscious and proactive assistant built into this purpose. How it works? Basically, we will make 3 reports. A financial one, which is like a personal balance sheet. A personal one, which is something that go and we'll try to understand a little bit more who you are instead of what you have. So we will ask some obvious questions such as socio-professional information, but we will also inquire about, for example, your passions, about your worries, your concerns, etc. And the third one, and this is something really new for the customer, we will realize a cognitive assessment. A cognitive assessment is a way to use scientific tests in order to measure your sensitivity to cognitive bias. So, one other question, who here is familiar with cognitive bias? Okay. Let's imagine you have to buy a Bluetooth speaker, let's say. You go to the local shop and this speaker costs 100 €. While you are in the shop, you learn that this speaker, 10 minutes far from here, costs half the price. It's a bargain. Would you go in this other shop to buy it? Probably. Let's imagine that 1 year later, you have to buy a new television. This television costs 1,500 €. You are again in this first shop, and you learn that in another shop, you have the same televisions that cost only 1,450 €. Would you go to buy there? Probably not. So now explain me why you don't provide the same value to 50 € and 50 €. This is because of a bias, a cognitive bias. This is something that is trigger you, and this is something that is really influencing your financial behavior. And currently, the scientific literacy lists gather around 200 of this bias. The one I just said is Weber-Fechner law. And what we will do is to pick the 10 most influent bias on your money management, on finances, and we will evaluate you on this. This leads us to have a report on a new aspect of your personality, and we will detect some hidden characteristic of your personality. I don't say much more about bias. I would be happy to share about it later with a drink, but what you have to remember here as a takeaway is your science, because, well, it's about RI. Now, once we did all these reports, Jared is able to work. We can provide tons of things. What we will provide can go from information providing to analysis, best practices, prediction based on artificial intelligence, and even a monitoring of your behavior. All of these things, I don't want to enter too much in details, but leads to a few benefits for the user. And these benefits are the fact that he will be able to learn, he will be able to better understand, to reduce the effort required by the money management, and to reach the goals we will help him to define. In order to reach this level of satisfaction, some key principles are necessary. And these key principles, I only show a few one, but what I really, really believe in and what I really want to provide through this application is the fact that we have to make this solution as simple as possible to use. Why do we use compulsively social medias? Because the cognitive effort required to use social media is reduced to 0. You just open the app and you don't have to seek information. Information is provided to you. This means that you don't have to spend any effort to scroll on these applications. What we want to make is something similar. This is like a Siri, but a Siri for finance. A conscious assistant that will provide you the information you need instead of asking you to seek for the information you need. This is my next takeaway. You have to make it easy to use. And pardon my French, but you understand this is the ingredient. There is three main ingredients, three main pillars we rely on. The first one, as I said, is the fact that we are based on science, but I already explained this. The second is the fact that we are powered by artificial intelligence, algorithm, and data in order to make all the features I already presented functioning. We need, obviously, a lot of technologies. But the hidden thing behind our solution is the fact that we are backed by a family office. And this is something critical, because a family office is like the top of the wealth management. And these kind of entities are already providing this kind of services to wealthy people. The only difference is that wealthy people have a real Jared that sits in an office and is ready to pick his phone each time something happens and each time the customer have to know something. In our case, what we want to do is to build a process and to build technologies that make these existing things, scalable. So this is my next takeaway. We have to democratize something, because the solution, when you have to facing an issue, the solution is probably existing, but it's just inaccessible to the right people. And this approach is something critical, because this makes us different to our competitors. Because once you see everything through an RRI prisma, through an RRI frame, you are able to understand that what makes you different is the fact that you are answering in another way the issue. You are answering the issue based on what the customer is expecting. So this is my next takeaway. Use RI as a strength, and it will make you different. Talking about the customer, once again, seeing things through responsible research and innovation prisma, through this framework, helps you to define in another way than usual the markets that you are facing. I could have divided the market in many ways, but when I decide to divide it by taking some RI insight, I realize that I can sort people by interest and by knowledge. And my mission is to help all the people that are not in the upper right segment to join it. So I'm trying to make it as easy as possible for these people to gain knowledge and to gain interest into finance. So my takeaway number 6 is that you have to spot the right people. And once you do it, you will realize that things become global and your solution is universal. Because you will realize that the solutions that, the problem that you are trying to solve and the solutions that you are trying to provide is something that can apply anywhere. Because I'm talking about financial inclusion and financial education, because this is about it. It's all the matter of Jared is about financial inclusion. And what you will realize is the fact that financial inclusion today is really critical. It's so critical that the OECD and the European Commission built a whole framework based on this and released it in the beginning of this year. So if you spot the right people, it will be universal. And one last thing about the RRI frame. There are some studies that show that during COVID, or since COVID, majority of the population is afraid of the future. A majority of the population don't know how to handle with inflation. We have some studies that show that the influence of cognitive bias on the financial behavior exploded during COVID, and it was only one crisis. If you feel that you don't know how to handle a few of these things, if you don't know how to overcome this, if you don't know what strategy to adopt, or if you are the feeling to be a little bit maybe alone by facing these upcoming things, it's probably because you need something like Jared. And this is my bonus takeaway. The worse the situation, the better your solution. It's obvious because if the problem that you are trying to solve is likely to increase, it's obvious that your solution will become even more useful. And to finish, by following these steps, your innovation should be whether social and responsible, because you are addressing, on one hand, the expectation of the population, the expectation of the public, but on the other hand, you will also fit the RRI way of building your solution. So this means that by following these steps, by following the RRI principle, you will almost guarantee the fact that your innovation will be social and will be responsible. This is irrelevant, and the only thing I want to say to finish is that I think that by proceeding this way, by trying to tackle this issue and by building this kind of solution, Jared can be considered as an RRI by design in the issue we want to solve, in the way we build the answer, and in the DNA of our solution. And one last word on what but this is for you, is the fact that I'm pretty sure that without the insight and without the learning of DigiTeRRI, this startup would have probably taken another way. So I'm really glad that I would be able to embrace this challenge by using the learnings of this project. So you can consider it as an outcome. Thank you.
This is really great news. So we have an important impact. But you started to learn about RRI in RRI project. Yeah. So and you continued and improved. Okay, yeah, great. So we have our next speaker is is an entrepreneur, has entrepreneurial blood in his body. He is the owner of a Miraplast company in Austria. And this is Markus Brunnthaler. He is a polymer engineer and has a degree also in business administration. He is the owner of the company, the CEO, yeah. And he has participated in DigiTeRRI Project, and you will learn about how he has integrated what he has learned in his company. I'm very pleased that you are here. Welcome to this conference.
You show me the card? Yeah. Okay. Thank you and good afternoon. Sorry. I'm usually standing more free that I can kind of walk around. Okay. I'm usually walking around a little bit more. Thank you and good afternoon. I guess we have another outcome of a project, like we just heard, that I want to share with you a little bit. So really quickly, what I'm going to address today is brief introduction of myself, what Marianne already started. I wanted to show you a little bit what DigiTeRRI is and what our topic was, and what our work among the stakeholders in terms of the foresight process we used and the scenarios we developed. And then I will finish with a few learnings that we had. So I'm a local. I know how many Viennese or how many Austrians we have here. I think it's quite a few, but the rest is international. Very good. Welcome to Vienna. So I'm a local. I'm born in Vienna here in 1974. I have a major in plastics engineering and business administration, and I studied here in Vienna and a little bit in the United States. Marianne already mentioned I'm owner and CEO of Miraplast company plus subsidiaries. It's a family-owned business. I'm the third generation. We have approximately 110 employees, and our main technology is injection molding of plastics parts, and we do also the molds. And we basically have two business units. One is something that everybody's familiar. It's like Tupperware, so we do containers and everything for food contact, and some technical parts that go from car industry to electrical industry, etc. And on the industry level, I had to Google that, what it is. In English, it would be called the Guild Masters and the Vice Guild Masters, or the Austrian small and medium-sized plastics processors have their own group in Austria that negotiate with the government, with the unions, etc. So I'm a member of this group, and also I'm a member of the Austrian Kunststoff Cluster that connects the whole industry among the supply chain. Now, what was Styria exactly, and what was our topic? Styria was about ecosystems, and again, there's responsible research and innovation idea. We had 3 regions in this project. One region in Catalonia, then in Nordland in Finland, and Lower Austria. Norway, sorry, Norway. And our local region here in Lower Austria. The people in Norway, they worked on the 17 SDGs, and they had a rather, I would say it was more like on the meta level, an idea to work on strategies and planning on a more sustainable society. The people in Catalonia were really working on something very hands-on stuff on zero waste. They focused on the zero waste idea, and also closely linked that to the SDGs. And my region, to sum it up in short, is we wanted to make the polymer industry carbon dioxide free, so zero carbon dioxide footprint. Everybody who was in the project, the DigiTeRRI, I guess, worked pretty similar than the DigiTeRRI project. So you had a bunch of workshops, and you worked with Foresight. So we had 3 workshop groups, and here you see our stakeholders looking at the camera, not working. So it was a very good and mixed group of people from the industry, people from R&D, from science, from universities, and also from governmental agencies working on this topic. And what we came up with is, in the beginning, we started to find some factors that would have an influence on making plastics industry carbon dioxide free or neutral. So this was, in the beginning, we basically plastered a lot of walls with our great ideas, and then we had to somehow condense this down. And what we did is we ended up using the underlined ones, and you see everything from gender equality and education and the image of the plastics and raw material and business model, and so on and so on. And we had to focus a little bit and pick some of the factors and leave others out, but not to get that wrong. We didn't just skip gender equality and education just to leave it out. This was basically condensed into other factors. So these 2 important issues were condensed, for example, into the skilled employees. If you want to improve your industry, if you want to bring that forward, you need skilled employees, and that's how do you get that? You get this by of course, by education, and also, of course, by bringing everybody in. So that's on the gender equality issue. Yeah, quite some interesting key factors that we found here until carbon footprint, and we also saw that government support on the transition to this, and holistic thinking and of course, taxing policies. So how do you work with government subsidies? Was very interesting. In the end, we ended up with something like this. We out of these factors, we started to describe what could be, how could a scenario look like, and you see, in most cases, we just have three yellow cards in the column, and we basically missed the 4th scenario. So in the beginning, we just had 3, and then we were standing in front of this and said, well, there's a 4th scenario missing, and these are the 3 scenarios plus the 4th one. So one scenario was if you talk about plastics industry and using of plastics, and you guys know all the media coverage we have on plastics and waste and whatever. So of course one of the first scenarios was, okay, there are no rules, there's just profit. So we give a damn shit on the environment, we just print money here. Yeah? And so there are no laws, no regulation on how to use plastic, on waste, on recycling, and so on. There's also no government support, there's only supply and demand, and we just try to make as much profit as possible. And the second one is the one on the right hand. It was like, okay, everything is fine. This where we would kind of start to settle in the very fast. To say, okay, everybody accepts plastics is something sustainable, and we can explain why this is the case, and so on and so on. But this didn't really thrill us, because we said we want to do it carbon dioxide free. That's why the third scenario is the happy world where Greta smiles, where we have closed carbon loops, and we basically fulfilled all the climate goals. We even exceed them, and we can grow our industry on the basis of this status. And then there was one thing missing, and that's what also the media gave us a little bit as a hint, because we're discussing a lot what would the world look like if there is no plastics. So one of the scenarios was a world without plastics. What does it mean if plastics is forbidden, if there is no new plastic brought into the market, but the existing one you can use, and you can recycle it, and at one point of time it's so much deteriorated that you also lose this one, and then there's really no plastics anymore. So these were the 4 scenarios. Now a little bit of learning issues for me and my business. Siri confirmed some of what I already kind of knew or experienced from what I do. Also as a vice guild master, so in my industry group, we already knew that plastics is a part of the solution and not part of the problem. And it's definitely a big part of the solution. The thing is, we have to communicate that and make it clear to people why this is why this is true and not wrong. Plastics itself as a material is not the real issue here. It's more like the way we use it, and especially the way we don't use it when we stopped using it. Let's put it this way. And we have to communicate that a lot. The right use, the right recycling schemes, and so on and so on. And one of the big issues is also we have to work together on closing the loops. Now we are a plastics processor, so we do about 1,000 to 1,200 tons a year, and we started to ask our clients to send back the products they don't use anymore. So if you go to the shop here in Austria and you buy a box from my company, there will be a little leaflet inside asking you, if you buy a new one, you might have an old one. So please send us back your old one, and you will get a voucher to cover your postal fees, and we will shred your box and we'll produce something new out of that. That is, in this case, it's not anymore allowed to be in food contact, but there are tons of applications that don't need a food grade. So you can do all kinds of buckets or boxes and so on and so on. It can be reused. So this is what we offer as a company. Yeah? As a company, we also learned that we continue to have to work on our footprint. Now, the technology itself on processing these plastics is not the real issue. It's not a huge footprint problem. We saw in our company that the heating system to heat the whole facility creates more carbon dioxide emission than the whole production. So that's not the issue. So now we're working on rethinking our heating system and not the plastics technology itself. And last but not least, although we as Miraplast company, we don't produce single-used plastics products, we see that we still have to offer something that is sustainable in the alternative, because it seems that for customers, everything if it's plastics, everything is bad. Whether you have this product just for 30 seconds, and I'm thinking about a little plastic spoon where you stir your coffee at the coffee machine and then you throw it away. That's like 30 seconds. Or you buy one of our boxes and you put in your fruits or your sandwich that you take to the office, and if you keep that safe and sound, you will have it for 10 years, and then you put it in the collection, and it will be re-shredded, and you can produce maybe a garbage bin out of that. It's not a big issue. We still have to offer that. So what we did and already and still do in our company, so we started to work with SDGs and had a look at what we can do, and we picked a few one. And just 2 years ago, we started a solar plant on our roof. So in the meantime, we can produce nearly 30% of our electricity. Also, up to 30% savings with new machine technology. We do have already sustainable products that are from bio-based materials, but also from recycling materials. And if you're interested, these are just the SDGs we tackle here that have an impact on the footprint, but there are other SDGs that we addressed too on the webpage I mentioned here. Now, what was the learning for the industry? And that was actually the more interesting thing, or one of the outcomes of Styria that we are actually pretty proud of that. I showed you before that we had this fourth strategy, or this fourth scenario. And this was the scenario, the world without plastics. So what we did together with the Kunststoff cluster is we came up with an online webinar on a world without plastics, and the subtitle was Back to the Past. And the reason why we picked that was we invited scientists and engineers to give a speech on that, on 4 issues: on medical service, on food, on mobility, and on telecom and on communication. And if you look at these 4 points here, that you basically touch one of these 4 points, if not all 4 points, every day. So in everyday world, if you take out plastics, in medical service, I mean, there was a medical doctor from the university who showed us an emergency room from 1850. You don't want to be sick anymore. Yeah? So medical service without plastics at the level we have today, unthinkable. Yeah? Then we changed over to food scientists and had them talk about what's the impact on food if you take away plastics, especially as a function of securing and making the product more durable, easier to transport, and that you don't have so much food waste. Yeah? And there are important or well-known examples of meat, of beef that you shrink basically in vacuum film. What is the extended shelf life of that? But also very stupid and easy is the cucumber that is shrinked in film, that it doesn't lose water, and how much more long it lasts by doing that. Yeah? Also mobility, nobody thinks about that one, but the tire on your car is plastics, so please remove the tire from your car if you have no plastics, and think about what we did then before. So we had like horse carriages with wooden wheels, and with wooden wheels, or we have the railroad, which is a great thing, but that alone doesn't work. Yeah? And also, last but not least, communication. If you look at cell phones or everything that's electronic, and I'm not talking about the cover, but I'm talking about insulation and about making things very small. This would be not possible without plastics and plastics engineering. So this gave us a little idea of what the world would look like if we just take away totally this material. For me, the even bigger thing, and we are really proud of that one, is that out of the DigiTeRRI project, there were a certain number of stakeholders that continued the work of thinking on strategies on how to reduce or even make the carbon footprint of the industry, bring it down to 0. And we, together, we founded a Verein in German, in association, yeah. The Austrian Carbon Cycle Circle, a little bit tricky in the wording, but the idea is not to think about plastics, but to think about carbon. So we have to close not just the plastics loop, we have to close the carbon loop. As long as we don't burn plastics or we don't burn oil, the whole thing is in a cycle. So if we can recycle plastics, if we can recycle materials using just little more carbon footprint to regain that, it helps us. And this group started 1.5 years ago with this association, and we brought together experts of the plastics industry and other industries around. We're trying to attract experts to come and join us. We try to help other industries. We try to help our own industry to work on issues on how to make our industry more sustainable. Yeah, just visit the website. Please join. We have a lot to do. I'm just talking about corporate social responsibility directive, taxonomy regulations, and so on. So there are some very, very big issues coming up, and we are working on that one. Now to close the whole thing, the idea was to talk about values of a responsibility, of a responsible industry and business. My conclusion was we have to communicate a lot, and I'm talking about the plastics industry. Really have to tell people what we do, why we think that it's good what we do, be open for the discussion. Not everything is good. But we know exactly without plastics, it would not be better, it would be worse. We have to educate people, and I'm so keen to say, if you want to save the world, we have to become a plastics engineer, because we can do products with a lower impact, and we can also work on recycling. We have to do a lot of research still, and we have to develop sustainable technologies, and more sustainable projects. And one of the key learnings also was that we all have to take part in closing the loop. If we produce a plastics product, but the end consumer just throws it away and doesn't help us to bring it back to the cycle, it doesn't work. So everybody has to participate, and not just your neighbor who just threw the bottle in the wrong bin. We all have to do that. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you for your attention, and we'll stay here also for dinner if there are some questions. Thank you.
So I am not sure somebody from the European Commission or somebody's here who can tell the European Commission that what an impact we have with these RRI projects. So Alexi had learned a lot for his company. A company in Austria has implemented RRI, and we got to learn, we learned a lot how they did it. And I'm really proud and happy that we could manage this in this way. This was a great journey, Markus. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And with this carbon cycle circle is also a great work. And the head of this association is a lady. So she was also with us in the DigiTeRRI Project. Now we have somebody from outside RRI. However, when I talked to her first time, she mentioned so many things about values, so that I said she has to come to this conference. And Annelie Strömberg, she comes from the Dalarna Science Park in Sweden. She was a business controller in many famous Swedish companies, active all over the world. Working all over the world, and she is a sustainable strategist. Yeah, she does something about sustainable strategies. Please welcome with me Annelie Strömberg.
And I think everybody needs to stand up for a bit.
Okay.
I've been sitting for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
So I need to just
Can you make it in 20 minutes?
yes, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And you can be standing all along if you like. This is a good value to be standing up while talking. Yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah, we wanted to do this A lot, and it's always too much. Sorry.
First of all, I must tell you that I love color, and I have had no graphic designer to stopping me now, so I have gone all wild. And Mario, if you like to contact me later on, you can show me how to do it properly, probably. We need to talk, right? Yes. Yes, like I said, I had a dinner with Marianne when I was in Copenhagen, together with the colleagues. And we sort of connected immediately, and that's why I'm here. So I want to talk to you quite shortly about walking the talk, why values matter to innovation, or I most probably do. Oh, thank you. Okay, I have the same trouble moving around also, yeah? And why I most probably do think that they actually do connect. So I work since February for Dalarna Science Park, and I work closely with Värmland, so we are sort of brothers and sisters in a project that I'm also running. Okay? So what I'm going to tell you about, what Marianne thought I should come here and talk about, is actually how we do this for real. What is value-based for real? How do we actually do this in business? So that's what I'm going to talk about quite shortly. And remember, please, this has got no report. You can read no report afterwards about this. There is no scientific experiment. This is just my experience, and I'm getting quite old now. So trust me in this one. I'm 53, that's my age. Yeah? And what happened now? Okay, this is what happens. I spent quite a few years, 15 years, in 3 different base companies, in steel, in paper, and in energy. So this is really the traditional industry where I come from. And there was lovely 15 years, 3 lovely companies, and we do a lot of profit. And I will say we all the time now, because these are all my babies, so I'm still we with these companies. And after these 15 years, I swapped. I spent the next 9 years in one company and did exactly the same thing. Profit is, you need profit to run a company. So that's really the base. And you can do profit in many different ways, but you need money to pay the workers. So we need to settle that. But what actually happened is, for the first time, these values arrived. They sort of came to me in a way that I could not, there was magic appearing. And all of a sudden, it was like, okay, this is how you can do it also while still doing profit. So that's what I'm going to tell you shortly about. So just to make sure that you don't think that I'm lying about this, the company that I've been working for the past 9 years actually is quite innovative. You know, so it's not just anything. I do not really want to tell you what it is, but it is quite a big company, and they are quite innovative, right? So this is not something that I just made up. And I think that this company has managed actually to be quite innovative, because they do connect the customer and the society and sort of gets it all together, including the customer and all the workers, managers and co-workers that actually is in this place. So that's why I think it's a bit magic about this. So when I was in these other 3 lovely companies, there was values, of course. There was always values, but it was something that the HR was talking quite often about, and it was there was lovely words on a piece of paper. And we talked about them maybe once or twice a year, but they were just there. They weren't really connecting. They were connecting to me when I read them, but nobody said, can you explain them, or what do you mean by those? But instead, the last company I worked for used really these values to actually drive business for real. So how do we do this? How does it really happen? So the trick is really you have to make it an everyday business. Everybody has to feel it and touch it, and you have to sort of breathe it. And how do you do that? These are the values that this company works with. It is togetherness, and I was scrambling down words here because I was thinking, Marianne, why has she really invited me to this one, talking about DigiTeRRI and stuff, but you have all mentioned nearly all of these things that is here. You have mentioned culture and values. You have mentioned collaboration and working together, that leadership is really important and improvements is needed to run innovative businesses, right? And this is the company's values. So togetherness, you cannot do anything on your own. You need to go together, and this is really in the core of the company. It's everything. You need to trust one another, and you need to be open. Caring for people and planet, well, it's a must in these days. We have the Green Deal, and we need to be fair and inclusive, and we need to think about everybody that is around the world to be a really trustful company. Cost consciousness, everything we do today, we can do a little bit better tomorrow, and we can do it with a little bit less money. So you need to have this also in the DNA. You cannot be wasteful. That is really a sin. Simplicity equals efficiency. So please try to avoid all kind of bureaucracy, because that is not fun. Nobody wants to work in a company that bureaucracy, yeah, you know, it is something that is really, really hard. Simplicity is the word. Renew and improve. Also here, what we do today, we can always do a little bit better tomorrow. Different with a meaning. What does that mean? Well, it means that we can actually, we do not want to do what everybody else is doing. We want to be a bit in the forefront. Give and take responsibility. Early on in the journey when you work for this company, you are given responsibility because we think that that is the way you grow, and that is the way you get interested in other businesses within the company. So you get curious and you want to go there and you want to go there, but you only get that if you get the responsibility. So give and take responsibility is really important. And lead by example. If you can't do this, you do not belong in this company. There is not just knowledge that they look for in this company. If you have the right values, you can work here and you can learn the rest. And I think you, Ahmed, was into that as well. If you have the right values, come and work here and we will take care of you. So these are the values that this company works for. But still, we haven't really touched about, this is also words put on a paper. So what is the difference really? How does it work? How do they make it work? So, if you're a coworker, when you get hired, we ask you about these values. Can you please explain, when we say simplicity, what does that mean to you? And how do you lead by example? That doesn't mean that you have to be a leader or a manager. Can you explain in your previous work, or if you come from school, what did you do to be a good leader? Can you explain that? So whatever you come from or whatever you have been doing, you need to talk about the values. And if you cannot do that, you probably won't be hired in this company. So, but you have this, so you can answer all these questions. You do get employed. What happens then? Well, when you do enter this company, you get 2 days of talking about these values, and you do that in workshops. So you actually get to know your friends, and you connect, and you talk about this. What does it mean for you, and what does it mean for you, and how can we work together and make this a great workplace? We do job chats. Every 6 or 8 weeks, we have job chats. Then we talk about these values. Is there anything that is bothering you? Is there anything that you are thinking about? Or how does it work with your colleagues? Is there anything in the values that we need to chat about? In the yearly goal setting, we make goals to these 8 values. You have to, as a coworker or a manager, say, these values, I want to work with these ones because I think these ones are tricky. So we set goals on these values. And like I said, we have workshop, all levels. This includes the co-workers and the managers. And most of all, I think it's really, really important that in everyday situation, you sort of can connect. Even if you don't know the values, you can have them in your back pocket and you can say, well, how do I address this issue, and why is this an issue? Maybe there is a value that I can actually address, and then everybody knows these values, so we can chat about that. It's also in your salary. You get higher salary if you are good in the values. It's really, really simple. And when promoting, if you're applying for a job, we talk about the values. And if also, again, if you find this is difficult, we help you. But if you do find that we are really good and these are my strengths, you will get a promotion based on knowledge and on the values that you have. And also, I've had a few terrible occasions where I actually have to coach manager out of the company. And then I also use the values, like, okay, it is this leading by example or giving and taking responsibility that this is an issue. And maybe you are stressed because this is not working, because you have really, really big control issues. So that mean that your managers or your co-workers, they cannot grow because you have this control issue. That means that you cannot give and take responsibility as it is meant to be. So maybe we have to bid farewell, you know? So these values are really, really important, and they are in everyday moment in this company. And also, when you have these values, this company is really, really good at praising each other when they are working, promote each other and say, this is really good, and how did you do that? And explain that to this one. So everybody can learn and connect from one another. And also, like I said, when they are not working, please address it. Be the leader that you want to be, and have you got a friend that is, or a coworker or a colleague that is not actually fitting into this one? Discuss it. Don't sort of try to avoid it, but do the feedback talk and actually have a chat about it and lean towards the values. It really, really works. And also, this is a company where it is quite all right to make mistakes as long as you learn something from them, you know? Don't do them, maybe you can do them twice. I've done mistakes twice. But if you do them the third time, well, not so nice. So please learn from the mistakes, but it is quite all right. And please share also, because that will help somebody else not to do the same mistake. So be transparent and share everything that is good and everything that is not so good. So that is really what I wanted to share with you, and what Marianne and I was having a chat about in this dinner in Karlstad a couple of months ago. Is it's not rocket science, but it really works. So if you want to address the values and you want to be an attractive employer, please work with the values. They will really, really work in your favor. And I have experienced both, and so I do know that I prefer the latter one, actually. Yeah. Thank you. That was all.
Thank you so much, and I'm really happy that you are here and you showed us that how can we make it run in a company. Why? Because I think we have written our values, as you said, in papers, but how to live with them. And this is, I thought it's worth to invite her to talk to us, because it's very linked to responsible research and innovation. Thank you so much. And now I have to announce that we have the René von Schomberg. He is, I would say, the highest recognized RRI expert in Europe. And it's really a great pleasure for us to have you here. Now he is at the Kate Hamburger College at RWTH Aachen, and please, welcome.
So you teach me the digital technology is here, no? Right? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this one. This one. Okay. Digital competence. Okay, thank you very much, Marianne, and I'm very pleased to be with you here. Well, after so many great talks, I'm not sure if I still can be original. By the way, you are allowed to remain seated. Hope that you are not so shocked that you suddenly stand up and go away. So, okay, so let's go to business. So my talk is obviously on from an RRI perspective and what the prospects are for what I would call value-driven innovation. And this is just one element. Obviously, I come from the RRI part, so and this is just one element which I want to highlight. You know, why value-driven innovation and how we could do it and why it's relevant and important. And so I will only focus on this part of the issue in order to, as a way of introducing this topic. I was suddenly reminded this afternoon about the fact when I was working in a commission, I always had a hard time to promote RRI because they would tell me, well, any research and any innovation is responsible. Oh, okay, yeah. So I have the same problem. I like to dance around. When I was working in the commission, I had a hard time promoting RRI because, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, especially our political masters had the firm belief that innovation and research are responsible a priori. They are always responsible. So then I thought, okay, then it's really my task to show them some cases of irresponsible innovation, show them what it is. And I think especially in the field of digital technologies, there are quite a few. And I want to categorize them in a few categories and then see what we could learn from it and what it means now for today. So this is a point of departure. And irresponsible innovation, in my view, can be categorized in four different categories. One is probably the most well-known one, and that's the phenomenon of technology push. Maybe the case of genetically modified organism in Europe was the most demonstration of this case, because there one single company out of the biotech tried to create a fait accompli by introducing GMOs on the market prior to regulation, and in a way which upset, of course, European citizens. And as a consequence, this went wrong. There are many cases of technology push. Another example is policy pull, and that's actually the opposite, so to speak, where, let's say, policymakers try to implement policies, try to implement innovations, sometimes beyond the scope of the technical feasibility. One example there, and we come now closer to digital technologies, is biometrics. Biometric passports were introduced, for example, in the Netherlands, where I'm a countryman of, in a way which was so fast that it resulted in passports where 1 in 5 was not readable. Actually, it is always interesting to contrast this with what the experts will tell you, because the experts will tell you biometrics is extremely safe. 1 in 20 million cases it will make a mistake. So the biopassports in Holland was 1 in 5. So this is an interesting translation. So that's policy pull. There are more other examples, body scanners at airports and things like that. There are all kinds of stories. And I think one which comes closest to where I want to talk about, actually, is about digital technologies, but more precisely about digital ecosystems, because I think we have to go away to judging those things in terms of ethics and values of particular technologies, but more in ecosystems of technologies. And innovations have hardly any, in any case, a particular technology. Very often it's a merger of different aspects of different technologies. Now, I think what is very important is when there is a neglectance of fundamental values, and this happened with the introduction of major major digital systems in the beginning of this century. One example is the electronic patient dossier, which was, I mean, in itself, all the examples I give actually from these technologies, they are not a priori bad products. And on the contrary, they can serve a public legitimate purpose. I think, for example, electronic patient dossiers serve a public purpose and an individual purpose, and those dossiers were meant to enable a shift, a very quick exchange between doctors across the country, across caretakers, so that if something happened on the street here, that the records could be quite quickly on the place and would of course be beneficial for first aid help, for example. Now, these things failed in the Netherlands in 2011 in the Senate after a 10-year period of implementation. That project was extremely technological driven. In the meantime, the computer power also, of course, increases also enormously. And in the end, around 15 million euro was lost on that project because they ignored who exactly has ownership of the data. Are these the doctors? Are these the patients? Or are they the researchers who produce these data? Who have access to this data? When they have access to this data? All these experts, all these aspects, of course, they were, in the end, they became relevant, but then it was too late for the design of the systems. So, irresponsible innovation can bring a big loss of profit. Just to cite a previous CEO of Nokia, you know, it is thousands times more costly to correct something after it is in operation than in the design phase. So, in other words, and that's another element from value-driven innovation, it's about responsibility by design. You have to design your systems, your digital systems, according to values which can be carried by society at large. So now, you know, I'm a philosopher, so we always make problems more difficult than they already are. Okay, what are then these values? And the point, of course, is that these values are not fixed. Not to quote another famous example in the history of innovation is what you probably all know from Henry Ford. He said, if I would have asked the people what they want, they would have told me, I want a steel horse, not a car. So there we are. And also when it comes to a fundamental value like privacy, privacy in itself as a value changes over time. I have there also a very nice example. The German inventor Röntgen from the Röntgen photos, he always made pictures of his hand to test the new technology on himself or his wife because nobody else was willing to do that because it was an invasion of privacy to make Röntgen photos. Now, I've seen colleagues hanging their Röntgen photos on the office walls. So, I mean, these things change. But of course, we still have an understanding of privacy. The value of privacy did not disappear. Only the way we apply privacy to the situation differs. So, in other words, we need, and I'm a proponent, it was mentioned also already during this conference, of implementing foresight along RRI projects or RRI innovation elements. So foresight can apply to the technology, but also needs to apply to how we value things. It's not about values as an entity, but how we value the things in the process. And we have to take this dynamics into account. So this is all quite challenging. So in other words, also lack of foresight will make things irresponsible. I mean, from the technical area, we know that for a long time. I mean, in already more than 150 years ago, the first reports came apparent that asbestos, for example, is very dangerous for human health. It took more than 100 years then to ban it. And even now, today, we can predict that still 10,000 of people will die as the consequences of having been exposed to the stuff. So lack of foresight can be very dramatic. So in other words, just to get rid of the agenda that innovation is a priori responsible or research is a priori responsible, I think there are cases very clearly where we can see what it means actually, what renders technology and science irresponsible in cases, but not necessarily fixed to the outcomes. Again, all the examples I gave from irresponsible innovation could have been examples of responsible innovation if alone we had done it properly. Maybe as a final point is the public-private relationship, which I think is dramatically shifting because of the introduction of digital technologies. I want to give another example of what I would regard here as an irresponsible innovation, and this is an example which is going on in the US for some time, and it is that the Justice Department assesses files of prisoners, whether they can be released earlier than foreseen from from the period where they officially were foreseen to be imprisoned. Now, they do that on the basis of an algorithm, and that algorithm is produced by a company. And the company has ownership of this algorithm, so you don't know how this assessment is actually made. It's made by a public office, the Justice Department, but the application is done by a private company, and we don't have access to it. So I think this is something we certainly should not do in Europe, but it's not excluded that these type of things happens, that you have a privatization of algorithms and that we cannot verify what actually happens, so that we cannot ensure the accountability of the outcomes. Again, I think it would be a clear example of irresponsible innovation. So this brings me, of course, to the opposite case. You know, how then do we do it properly, and how can we make innovation value-driven? And this is in itself, again, I think, a 180 degrees turn from what is the classical understanding of research and innovation policy. As long as I have worked for the European Commission, research and innovation policy has always been a goal in itself, regardless of what it produces, because innovation was always seen, and I still think to a large extent is still seen as inherently good, because it always, and that's in itself, I think for 90% true, that any innovation, when it's marketed, it will create some kind of economic benefit or contributes to a general prosperity. I mean, that's at least the assumption of this whole thing and the legitimation of the whole thing. And if you look to the European Treaty in terms of values, I will show you later a graph, then the only value with, the only policy in the European Union which is detached from values is science and technology policy. We have since the 1950s a statement which is reinserted in the European Treaty in 1992. It says science and technology policy should promote technological advance. No further comments, this is it. And that sentence is actually extremely successful, because since the 1950s, the budgets for research and innovation has almost dramatically increased. The last 2 times 7 years almost doubled, and that in times of crisis. And just because this sentence is extremely controversial, uncontroversial. I mean, anything in European Council is very controversial, every comma is controversial, but science and technology policy is uncontroversial. It's an extreme case of where you get very quickly consent. It's amazing. Now, I'm a troublemaker. Because if you make science and technology policy dependent on values, then you get a lot of trouble. Because values are under the subsidiarity principle in Europe. So Austria has its values, the Netherlands has its values, and they decide for themselves and they don't communicate with them about that. So, and if you start doing this and saying, well, you have to make innovation value-driven, then you have a problem. Now, it's actually still interesting to see that we have made this shift, especially recently with the missions. So I think we are at a turning point, but just this is a memory that, in fact, making innovation value-driven, making science and technology policy value-driven is a revolution in the history of this whole stuff. How many minutes I have? Because I... 10 minutes. Okay, yeah, no, that's fine. No, I tend to talk too long, although I'm not French. So, okay. So this is another example, a recent example from the Netherlands, from Wageningen. That's a city in the center of the Netherlands. And yeah, I'm sorry for the Dutch language. I couldn't have it in English, but this is a smart street light as part of a smart city project. So this is a very recent thing. So, and again, it's an example of irresponsible innovation. So what this street light has is, among others, some sensors for you can hear what people say on the street, for example. And you have also security cameras and some other stuff, Wi-Fi equipment, charge possibilities for electric cars, digital information boards, etc. Now, a citizen initiative in the city has made a petition, and with an overwhelming amount of people turned up to turn this project down. And this is exactly for the same reasons as I quoted for this electronic patient dossier 15 years ago, exactly the same reasons. What happens to the data? Who has access to the data? How long this information is stored? How is the distribution to this data for interested companies, for example, who could exploit this data? These are things are all not clarified, and this is why it's turned down. Again, an example of something of a larger stuff. Actually, the whole idea of smart cities, I'm all in favor of it, of course, but it highlights the element that we cannot, in a sequential way, introduce technologies without looking to the broader design and where it is embedded, which other elements are communicating with this, and how do we design the system as such. Now, this is then very shortly some other negative examples about design, because this is where I'm heading to. It's value design, it's about responsible design of technologies, better to speak innovations, and they are of course based on values. Now what you see here are the famous Robert Moses Low bridges, and these bridges are deliberately built very low so that American blacks could not go with public transport to the coast. So this is, so to speak, racist design. Now this is another example, I would say a counter-example, and this is the case of the Netherlands, where you see a long dike, I think it's around 6 miles, with a lot of barriers. And on the left side is the North Sea, so that's salt water, and on the right side there's the lakes of the peninsula, and the dike is supposed to protect obviously the Netherlands for flooding. Well, why did they build this barrier? So what you can see is actually that the barriers are here open and the water can float from the North Sea into the interior lakes. And this is the result of a consensus among farmers who had an interest, of course, because if you had a closed dike, then you would get sweet water, would have an impact on agriculture, would have an impact on fishery, would have had an impact on tourism. So all these actors, tourism, farmers, fisheries. All these actors came together, and this has been the result after a long deliberation. It took actually a decade to get to this whole idea of designing these specific dikes where you have barriers and you only close them in occasions when it's really necessary. So this thing exists now, I think, 40 years, and it has been only closed 25 or 26 times. It's a rather expensive investment for such a thing. But you see, this is also value-driven design. Now, I think in science and technology, and especially in digital technologies, we can become ever more responsible for our outputs because the technologies are of such a nature that it enables us also to become more and more precise. And this is also why this is happening already in nanotechnology, where they talk about responsibility, safety by design, etc. These type of words. And of course, in computer technology and in digital technology, we have since 20 or 25 years the slogan of privacy by design. And these are important design principles for making technology responsible. Now, I will close with a case where I think I still have 4 minutes. Okay, so I think this is essential for RRI, is actually what do we want to get out of these innovations? What are the type of things we want to produce? Where does we end up to? Now, this is, I'll give you a case of what is called here future farms. It says here small and smart, but they could also be very big and smart. And these type of farms are run by new type of technologies called precision technologies. One of them is, for example, the agri-bots, which are able to detect the soil composition so that they can precisely per square meter actually give the right amount of herbicide, for example. You have automated tractors, you have texting cows, you have drones who can predict the weather in 2 hours ahead of time. And these things are all related. You see different technologies, but they are related to each other because they need to share data. And what's more about this picture is actually that you can envision this farm as unmanned. There will be no farmers in the future anymore on the land. This can be run by Monsanto in Detroit from the head office, and thousands of kilometers further, the farm can be run. These type of technologies, of course, like any new technology, are sold as being sustainable. And of course, they will make things better. But everything what's decisive is here is how you design this ecosystem of different technologies. How do they fit together? How do they work together? And again, the essential element is, of course, who has access to the data, who has ownership to the data, and what do you do with these data? Now, so this brings me then shortly to this overview. You can have 2 types of innovation in this area. First, of course, the one I advocate, and that's the one of responsible innovation. And the obvious element is, of course, that you need stakeholder involvement from farmers and both producers and consumers, how you actually want to design the overall system. Now, this would include, of course, also well-known elements like privacy by design, but also other elements. But what is essential here is actually who actually provides the access to the resources, who becomes the architect behind this. And therefore, I had my comment earlier this morning in the question, what is the role of the public authorities here? And they are very important here, because they have to decide that farmers has, for example, priority in access to resources rather than rather than particular multinationals, for example. The whole governance of the system can be done also on the basis of codes of conduct, for example, or public-private partnerships in which you define all these things. And in Europe, luckily enough, we have a sort of draft of these things already running where farmers have actually ownership of these data. But the consequence of this whole system is, of course, that you get another agriculture than if you leave it up to global market mechanisms. Because in the other situation, you will have very likely an agriculture which only produces large commodities, soya, tea, this type of stuff. And, you know, probably in 20 years we have a degradation of agriculture if we run it only by global markets. And this brings me to my final point. When we talk about the introduction of technologies, we should not do it in a sequential way. I mean, if we leave it up fully to the market, this happens in a sequential way. And then you get an entrenchment. You will not be able to design the system as such anymore. You cannot correct it anymore, unless for very huge costs. And you are stuck with it. So this is actually sort of the final message. It's not about design of technologies anymore. It's a design of systems, how they relate to each other, and how we implement them in values, which can, of course, evolve over time. So I look forward to your comments, and you can do that on my website. Oops, it's gone. But it's, you are just renévonschomberg.wordpress.com, and then there it is. So I look forward for your comments, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It was great. We got some inspiring ideas how we can work in future. There are many possibilities how to apply this. And on the other hand, you see, we have already done the system considerations in our projects. And so we can also learn in future from each other, and you can talk to René von Schomberg after when we have this poster session, and yeah, and tomorrow also, of course, yeah. And before we go to the poster session and the group who has registered for the workshop, Angel will go with the group to the room. This is on the side, back side there. I ask Sabine Neuberger. She has some links with René von Schomberg and what he presented, because she has a PhD from the Wageningen University. She is close connected to agriculture and food, and in this innovation thing. And she is in our team at AIT in Innovation Systems and Policy since January. So, Sabine, the floor is yours. She introduces the poster session now.
Yes, exactly. So I don't want to bother you too long. So there's a poster session, as already advertised. So in the morning session, the project partners, they already talked about the roadmaps which were developed in the separate regions. And then from the roadmap, specific actions arose. And the project partners now summarized some of the selected actions and presented them in like a poster format or a roll-up basically. And these are all set up in the room next door. So it's like the first room to the left. And you have now the opportunity to look at the posters, read the posters, then also talk to the persons responsible for developing the roadmap and the actions, and then also implementing them. Ideally, the person who developed the poster is also standing next to the poster, but as the value session is taking place at the same time, we also have some of them also develop videos with the QR code on the poster, so you can just scan the QR code and you have like a very short video of also the content of the poster. So yes, I'll invite you to go to the room next door, maybe grab a glass of wine before you enter and have a look at the beautiful posters, talk to the persons and enjoy. Thank you.